right, here we go. Last two here. We've got sine of 221 degrees, and we're not going to be able to figure this out without using our calculator, but still want to go through kind of that same process. Let's understand what the calculator's saying to us. So 221 degrees, that's going to be a little bit past here. It's not to 270 degrees, but there's our angle. So our reference angle, our theta, or alpha rather, is going to be 221 minus 180 degrees. So we have 41 degrees as our theta. And so let's take a look at this. First off, it's in the third quadrant, so quadrant 3. So we know that sine should be negative. Sine is negative. Let's just leave negative, not -1, but just, I guess it doesn't really make a difference, but the sine is negative. Now, it's not one of our special right triangles, so we can't use these tools to help us as far as that goes, but I want to do a couple of things. We know that sine is going to be negative here in this third quadrant, but let's hit in, kind of see I go on to the next problem, that in degrees, let's first off hit, what's the sine of 41 degrees? Okay, and so it's 0.65601. So sine of 41 degrees is 0.6516, or 6561. I think that's what it was. 656, yeah, we'll round it to the fourth decimal there. Okay, now that's sine of 41 degrees, and remember that would be, if it was just 41 degrees, that would be here, that would be a positive value, and I guess actually that'd be a vertical angle, so it should go directly with that one. 41 degrees. Now we, however, have the sine of 221 degrees. And I want you to check out what happens here. So remember, 0.6561. We had 41 degrees. The sine of that was 0.6561. Okay, now let's put in the sine of 221 degrees. Now notice it's the same value, 0.6561, but it's negative because remember sine is negative here in the third quadrant. So negative 0.6561. And perhaps you could figure out, hey, the sine of what in quadrant 2 would give you, well, if it's sine here in that, in the second quadrant, that's going to be positive. So what would give you 0.6561? And if it was in quadrant 4, the sine of what value would give you negative, because again, quadrant 4 here, only cosine is positive, so it would give you negative 0.6561. And I want you to pause the video right now and think through for a second. What values could we plug in here that would give us these output? That would give us 0.6561 and negative 0.6561. So really pause here, go through, think through, and what would those be? Or actually, even better yet, I'm not going to put the answer up here. I want you to come in with the notes tomorrow and have that ready. What do you think those values in quadrant 2 and in quadrant 4 would have to be to give us those same output? Okay, now last one, sine of 1,000 degrees. Okay, so let's sketch that out. Well, that's going to be one time around. That's 360. Now there's only, let's see, 1,000 minus 360 degrees gives us, oops, 740. Nope, that should be a 640. 640. That's one time around, and then we'll go around a second time. So minus another 360. And now we're at 0, 280. And so we've gone around 2 full rotations, but remember it's periodic. It really doesn't make a huge difference because it's going to go through that cycle over and over and over. So 280 degrees. Well, 180 is to right here, 270, and then just a little bit farther, another 10 degrees. However, we're going to deal with, though alpha or theta gets us all the way over to here, we're going to deal with this reference angle on the inside. So that's going to be, if that was 270 and then another 10 degrees, we're left with 80 degrees back in here. So 80 degrees is our reference angle degrees. So if that's sine in the third quadrant, so quadrant 4 rather, in quadrant 4, sine is negative. Sine is negative. All right, and let's find out what it will be. So first off, let's go with positive 80 degrees. If I had sine of 80 degrees, what would that give us? So 80 degrees, sine, and so sine of 80 degrees equals, what number was that? 9.4, 9.9848. So 0.9848 gives us 0.9848, I think is what it was. 9848. Let me just double check that. 9848, yes. Okay, so if it was in the first quadrant, that was sine of 80 degrees. But then sine of, let's just give ourselves a little more room. Sine of 1,000 degrees, that's going to end up being in the fourth quadrant. It should end up being negative, right? Well, let's find out. What is the sine of that same value, but maybe negative? Let's find out. So 1,000 degrees, and then sine of that. And there we go. It is the same number, just this time it's negative. So we've got negative 0.9848. And we've got something in the fourth quadrant and in the first quadrant right now. And will you go through and find something in quadrant 2 that the sine is going to be, well, in the second quadrant, sine is positive. So it'll be the sine of what in the second quadrant gives you positive 0.9848. And then what in the third quadrant? This time sine will be negative, would give you what sine of what, would give you negative 0.9848 in the third quadrant. And actually even 1,000, that's gone around a few times. So what in the fourth quadrant, just the first rotation around, sine of what would give you, it's the fourth quadrant, so it'd be negative 0.9848. Try to find these three values that would give you those output, and we'll check that in class tomorrow. All right, hope that all helps.